lot of assumptions when you're young and you start a nonprofit, like, oh, when you go to college, you'll stop it, or, all of these things and these questions. What's important for me is that young people, if they hear those critiques or questions or concerns, they still follow through on their goals. And that's what Queens Gambit's here for. We want to be here to support and empower as many youth as we can, to show that your leadership matters, your insight matters, everything that you have to say matters.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Grow Healthy, Help People, a podcast that Accordis puts on. I am here today with Ashley from Queens Gambit. How are you today, Ashley?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So tell us where you're calling from.
I'm calling from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So good. So before we jump into everything that you guys do over at Queens Gambit, tell us a little bit about how you got to being a nonprofit leader. How did you get here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's a great story. So I grew up in Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh has a wealth of nonprofit organizations. We have thousands. It's really a place where nonprofits start and grow. We have great philanthropic support, all of these things. So I grew up in that environment. But I first started playing chess when I was about 4 years old, and my siblings played. We all had played together, went to tournaments. And being in the competitive chess space, you see a lot and experience a lot, just like any other sport. I say that competitive chess is just like soccer, basketball, whatever. You are training, you are going through a lot of practices, hurdles, like all of these things that any competitive sport has. At the same time, the chess space is very male dominated. And that's something that I had noticed at an early age. So my sister and I would go to tournaments. We would often be, the only young women there. So that had a huge impact on how we engaged with the world, really, and how we had those questions where, are we supposed to be here? What does that look like, right? So that sort of carried with me for many years, and I decided that I wanted to maybe change that a bit. So as I got into teaching, I experienced the same thing. People were tending to have male teachers. As a woman chess coach, that was just different for a lot of people. So I said, how can we change this? And that's how I started Queen's Gambit, really at the onset with the goal of how do we empower young people through chess, but also how do we empower young women and girls through chess? And I just decided that because all I knew really was the nonprofit space. That's what I wanted to, get into. And that's what they recommended, when you search, like, I have this idea, what do I do? It's always, you start an organization. And that's what I did and sort of how I ended up in this space.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you said you started playing when you were 4. So that's so young. Did you have family that was involved in the chess space?
Yes, yes. So,
Okay.
I'm the youngest of four. So my siblings, being older than me, they had all played.
Ah,
My parents liked chess. They had an interest in it. My mom never fully learned how to play, and so she said to my dad, I really want you to teach our kids how to play chess. And that's what he did. And we just sort of had an interest in it. We were good at it. And it's just something where you observe it. That's what's so fascinating and magical about chess, is that you can observe how the pieces are moving, what role they play on the board, and you can learn by watching and engaging. And that's really what we did. So that's how we all sort of came together and started to compete.
that's incredible. So tell me a little bit about what do you do at Queen's Gambit? What do you offer people and kids in the community?
Absolutely. Queen's Gambit, when we started, like I said, it was very focused on how do we empower young people through chess? How do we get as many young people as we can engaged in the sport? As we've grown and sort of where we are today, we're really this model for youth-led leadership through chess. So our mission is to elevate a new generation of strategic, inclusive, and civically minded leaders through chess. And all of those terms are really important because they highlight really what's so wonderful and engaging about chess. There's a lot of research about why should I learn how to play chess? Why should my kid learn how to play chess? How does it help people? There's a lot of research out there. How I like to frame it for families is that when you're playing chess, the dendrites in your brain physically grow. So they actually grow, and that leads to smarter, faster decision making. So we have that side of it, right? Where your brain is just thinking differently. It's pivoting in new ways. You're gaining these really, really great skills. But even deeper than that, as we've noticed, and as I started to notice as I was teaching more kids, we call it a profile of a chess player. So when you're playing chess, here are some of the key things that you're building. These critical thinking skills, right? You're looking at a chessboard, you're solving puzzles, you have to think through certain moves ahead, right? It's the decision making, it's the strategic thinking. And as I've been in this space and it's evolved, these terms I think are used a lot, right? We try to use strategy a lot, decision making, all of that. But chess at its core really started these terms, I think. I mean, chess is this sport and game. I mean, it's both, forcing you to think in new ways. And it's targeting parts of your brain that typical games and other types of games aren't targeting in new ways, right? It's about adaptability. How do I come back after losing, or if I'm down pieces, how do I come back? It's perseverance. It's, risk management. All of these skills that we need to know if we need to be effective leaders.
Yeah.
So what Queen's Gambit does is we do that in a really safe, empowering environment. So we have after school programs, we have in school programs, events, different types of partnerships, right? Where we are using chess as a vehicle to teach these really important skills. But what I say makes us especially unique is that we've always been youth led and youth run. So when I started Queen's Gambit, I was about 14. And when I was thinking, how do we expand this? What do we do next? I was hiring, youth instructors. So they could be as young as eighth grade. They can be, in early college, right? They are young leaders that are teaching other young people how to think and how to strategize, right? We know, and there's data that backs this up, that young people learn even better when they're taught by other young people. That's so critical. And that's what we call it our Next Move Leaders program does, where young leaders are teaching other young leaders chess. And they're building these really important relationships, and it's peer mentorship. It's this intergenerational diversity. It's all of these really important skill sets that we need to be able to thrive in different ways. So when I think of Queen's Gambit and what we do, on one hand, it is chess programming, but on another, it's something very, very deep where it's empowering youth to see themselves in new ways and showing that when young people are working with young people and we're empowering each other, really exciting things can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that so much. I how when people start with you and they become a leader and they become a mentor, is that generally how it works? They've been playing with you for a while, whether it be through after school programs, in school programs, and then they work their way up to being a leader.
Mhm. That's a great question. We've had a lot of young leaders that have gone through the program with us, whether I had taught them when they were in elementary school or, they took part in other programs and they saw the impact and they wanted to go back and teach. We've also had some that have just, reached out. Maybe they're interested in the nonprofit space. Maybe they're interested in being an educator. Maybe they are just looking for a way to, make an impact in their summer or whatever that looks like, right? We've had a lot of different types of people reach out. I think that what makes Queen's Gambit exciting for them is that you do not have to be like the incredible chess player to be a part of the program or to teach other kids. What's important for us, and we have curriculum and things they can utilize. What's important for us is that they have this excitement for other young people and they want to empower them. So it's a bit of a mix, and I think for anyone that's listening, that is maybe they are in that eighth grade through college age group, right? And they're like, I really want to teach chess or get involved. You don't need to be an amazing chess player, right? Knowing the basics is fine. Uh, and you don't have to have, engaged with us in the past. Reach out and think about how you can be a part of this, right? In other ways to engage.
So is it something that people can do virtually, or does this all have to take place where you guys are located?
Great question. We have some virtual programs. Back in 2020, as everyone pivoted to virtual, we did as well. And what we've seen is that the students that were with us during COVID did go on back when they were able to go back to school, took part in their chess club, and we were able to impact them again in person. There's a huge debate about, whether or not kids should learn chess virtually or not, or what role that has. And I think chess is a very different sport when you're playing it online, just like anything is. You're just gaining different skills out of it, right? It's still chess and you're still thinking through these problems and all the things, but it just feels a little bit different. So I always tell people that you can do both. We do have virtual opportunities that you can take part in. Though I will say that a lot of these in-person opportunities are where you can see students in different ways and different environments. We're really big about being a part of your community and flexing that civic muscle. So if you are, we try to have partnerships that are across southwestern Pennsylvania. So if you are in, for anyone that's listening, if you're like in McKeesport or you are in Washington County or wherever you are, we'll make sure we can fit you with the opportunities. If you are not even in Pennsylvania, right, that's totally fine too. We can fit you with the right opportunities because chess itself, it's a very connected community. So I've had people reach out to say, I really want to teach chess in my community. I'm not in Pittsburgh. Where do I go? Can I still work with you? And I say, absolutely, if you wanted to do some virtual program, of course, but I also encourage you to look at the local organizations in your own community. How are they teaching chess? What does that look like, right? And maybe it's not certainly our model because our model is very unique, but you can still take some of those skill sets and engage in different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. That's wonderful. So, at the beginning, you mentioned when you were getting started, you really noticed that this was very heavily a male oriented sport. And so, that's something you wanted to change. Are you seeing that change now? Have you found ways to really get more girls involved in playing chess?
We've seen a shift for sure. I'd say that it's certainly better than it was, but we still have a lot of impact to continue to make. When we look at, I like to make the comparison to CEOs, right? How many women are CEOs? What does that look like? And if you look at the numbers between how many women are chess players, or even how many women played sports, right? And are they a CEO? What kind of confidence they have? Looking at those statistics, there's a lot of alignment, right? So what we're trying to do is to say, when you're playing chess, you don't have to be the greatest at it. It's not about, if you're going to win all these games, though a lot of the kids that we work with are very, very competitive, right? For us, what it's about is that they're working with other young women and they're engaging in this really great community. So we've partnered with, the Boys and Girls Clubs to create this program called Her Next Move. And we meet once a week, and it's just girls from all different types of communities coming together, yes, and working together, right? Looking back, if I have had that when I was learning and playing chess, that would have shifted a lot of things, right? That would have shifted my mindset a lot because I would have felt like, yes, I do belong here. And it's amazing to play with other people that look like me, that know what I'm experiencing in a safe, empowering environment. People always say to me, "Oh, we loved the, Queen's Gambit miniseries, all of these things." And I'm so glad that the miniseries got people engaged with chess.
Yeah.
At the same time, it's the tip of the iceberg because the miniseries didn't fully show, what it is like to be a woman in chess. So I encourage people to do a little bit of research on what it means to be a woman in chess because the Queen's Gambit was based on a book, right? It was written by a man, it was produced by a man, all of these things. And around this time, we even had, the Me Too movement in chess led by Jennifer Shahade, who's a women's world chess champion. So, all of these things, right? I encourage people to look into that because when I first started playing, I didn't know that. I just knew that something was different, right? If we can create more programs where girls are learning with other young women and they're engaging and there's more women instructors, then that's incredible and we're starting to make that impact. We are seeing an increase in the number of girls we're reaching, which is perfect. We serve about 2,000 youth per year. So we're seeing an increase in girls that we're reaching. At the same time, I think that, if you are a parent I've seen many parents, say they sign their son up for chess. And I always say, sign up your daughter. She might be interested, right? Maybe there's something she hasn't experienced before, right? Just try those different things and start at a young age, it's just like any other sport. Once you start and you get engaged with it, it'll have a huge impact.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what do you see right now as your biggest challenges in Queen Gambit and just running a nonprofit in general?
hmm Running a nonprofit right now, it always has this level of challenge, right? Like it's always challenging, but I think even more so now, it's difficult, right? We have to be careful, right? What language we use when we're talking about, if we're problem solving, critical thinking, whatever terms and things can be flagged just in the world that we're in right now, like that plays a role, right? I think that there's so many, it is amazing that, Pittsburgh has so many nonprofit organizations, and that was influential when I started. At the same time, there's so many organizations competing for funding, right? So we were very specific when we started in that we wanted to have very diverse funding. And we were able to do a lot with very little for a long, long time. And we made sure that, if we got a grant, we would have the good amount of fundraising. We would try to get sponsorship. We'd really try to diversify our funding. But it can be hard. Like if you're a nonprofit, right, you get the grant. Like sometimes you just don't have time to do all of the other oversight and all the things because you're doing everything in that space. So that is still hard, but we're still trying to diversify our funding. But when sponsorships are down, just again, the world that we're in, things are down. Sometimes there's more people competing for certain things. It's difficult. So that's a huge challenge. I think the other, and it certainly has gotten easier as we've used this language and framework and been very consistent how we talk about chess. But when I first started Queen's Gambit, it was like, oh, you're a chess nonprofit. Like there were a lot of questions about like, what does that mean? Like, what does that look like? You're saying that like chess equals life skills. Like, what does that even look like? And it wasn't that they were trying to, you know, critique or anything. They were just curious because it wasn't common to have an organization like that. And I think a lot of people now, as they're getting into the nonprofit space, whether it's pickleball, whatever it is, right? You've heard a lot of unique organizations. They're going to get a lot of those questions. So for us, it was important that we were consistent with our language and said, we are an organization that is impacting youth at all, and using terminology that people can understand. I would say that when I got too down in the weeds of like how amazing and intense chess is, like it would confuse people. That's why I like to be very basic and just say, chess can make you smarter. Here's why, right? So those are a lot of different challenges, and I'm sure you've seen in the spaces that you're in. We know that so many nonprofits struggle with time and management, all of these things. What excites me every day is going back to the mission, and that's what sort of helped me being like, I know I'm impacting youth, and if I need help, there's so many groups that can help me, just as your organization does and so that's a little bit about of what we've experienced.
Yeah, absolutely. And guys, if you're watching this and you're a nonprofit leader, you heard her talk about, and as so many nonprofits are talking about right now, fundraising is really difficult, just raising those funds. But also, another thing a Cordis can really step in and help with is getting your vision across to the people who are supporting you or wanting to support you. Because when people know your why and when they understand your why, that is when they want to get involved in what you're doing. And so at Accordis, we can help you do that to really portray your mission in the way that makes sense to people. We can handle everything on the back end from marketing to database to websites and accounting. And so if that's something you're looking for, you need, we will have a link at the end of this podcast and you can check us out. But continuing on with our conversation, what does the future for Queen's Gambit look like?
hmm I think we're going to continue to impact as many youth as we can and really be a model for peer mentorship, intergenerational diversity, and showing that chess is a tool that so many young people can utilize to help them. There's been pushes for years to have chess be a part of our school systems, be a part of curriculum. There's been all of these pushes. And I'm so for that. And it would be amazing if it could. At the same time, our goal is that for kids that maybe don't have the access, right? Because a lot of our work happens in areas where youth are either on or below the poverty line, or their math and reading scores really aren't where they want to be or should be. We try to target those areas, right? Because that's where chess can really help, when we know that when kids learn chess, their math and reading scores do increase because they're working on certain problems, right? So I would say to continue to impact more youth. As any nonprofit that is continuing to scale, we have tons of great goals and excitement because we want to make sure that we, are impacting youth. At the same time, we have to be strategic about what areas, right? So this year has brought about a really interesting, I almost say it's like an interesting chess position, right? Because we're figuring out how do we maintain the impact we want to make, but also knowing that it can be hard to continue to get more instructors. It can be hard to, be everywhere we want to be. So we're looking at partnerships where we're reaching youth that they're coming from all different parts of the city, right? And Boys and Girls Clubs are a great partnership. YMCA's are a great partnership. Looking at sites where we can reach the most youth. So that's really important for us, and to be a model for other youth-led and empowering organizations. Youth leadership has been something that has been, a passion of mine for years. And I talk a lot about being a woman in chess. It was also very difficult to be a young nonprofit founder because there's a lot of assumptions when you're young and you start a nonprofit, like, oh, when you go to college, you'll stop it, or, all of these things and these questions. What's important for me is that young people, if they hear those critiques or questions or concerns, they still follow through on their goals. And that's what Queen's Gambit's here for. We want to be here to support and empower as many youth as we can, to show that your leadership matters, your insight matters, everything that you have to say matters. And you might not feel that in certain moments, but it matters, and you matter as a person in the world. So that's really important for us as we continue to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful. Well, how can people help you? How can people help you reach those goals? What are ways they can get involved and or just support you from afar?
Mhm. Absolutely. I would love for them to, check out more of our work. So you can go to qgchess.org. You can follow us on social media. I would say please reach out. I love to hear stories about how chess has impacted people, right? And you could have played chess with your grandparents. You could have been in a chess club years ago. I've had executives that say, "Oh, I won a chess tournament when I was a kid. I didn't pursue it, but I loved it." Like, I love those stories, and those help us, right? Because maybe if you don't play chess anymore, that's okay, but you might have connections at schools or for sponsors, right? You might have those connections to say, hey, here's how we can continue to impact youth. For us, it's all about the youth we're impacting. So if you're curious, please reach out to us. We'd love to share stories, our impact reports on our website. We want to be here to talk about it. I would also say that, we're always looking for partnerships and young people that want to teach. So if you know any young people in your life that maybe are interested, we have a whole training process. So they're never going to go into a site, alone. They're going to learn how to be an instructor, all of those things. So we would love that. And also, there's a lot of groups that, want to donate chess sets or different materials. We welcome that. We do free programming in the community. So all of the work that we're doing is free to our partner sites. That means that they are not going to pay for anything, including chess sets. So we purchase the chess sets through grants and sponsorships. But if you
Okay.
have any that you'd want to, share out and provide to students, we'd love
Yeah.
that. And we have a whole process for that. So please reach out, and we would love to connect.
That's wonderful. And guys, we will have their website at the end of this episode. Please check them out, especially if you know anyone or have any youth that enjoy chess or want to get more involved or have been involved. Please reach out to them. It's such a wonderful organization. And training up those young people to be leaders is so important. And I love the whole mission and vision behind Queen's Gambit. So make sure to reach out, make sure to follow their socials and see what they're up to. Ashley, it's been so great talking to you
Yeah.
today. Thank you so much for doing this with us.
Yes, thank you so much. And I appreciate all that you do to empower nonprofits. So thank you.
Yep, absolutely. All right, guys, we will talk to you next time. See you later.